Here at Metabolic Mind, we're excited for you to see a new documentary called The Cholesterol Code. You might be wondering why we're so interested in cholesterol, but this documentary is about far more than just cholesterol. It highlights members of our community who have used ketogenic therapy to address serious mental illnesses like bipolar disorder, major depression, and anorexia nervosa, and who faced a real dilemma when their LDL rose significantly as a result. The Cholesterol Code explores their journeys, and while it may not have all the answers, it sheds important light on a critical question. We were also fortunate to host a panel discussion after a special screening where these individuals shared their stories firsthand. We hope you enjoy the recording. For Dave, for Wide Eye, for the Bazookies, for hosting this, for having us all here. And as you can see through the documentary, the science is really at the core, you could say, asking the questions, examining maybe what some don't want examined. So some see science as the star of this film. I sort of see it as the supporting star. The real stars are the individuals, because it's not just science for science sake. This is science because it affects people's lives. As you could see, as it was so well documented in this film, how people's lives depend on answering these questions and looking into it. And we're so fortunate to have 4 of the individuals that you just saw on the screen who are here live and in person with us. So let's welcome to the stage, first, Robyn Dobbins, Dr. Eric Rogers, Michelle Hearn, and Lauren Kennedy West. Just have a seat. Now, I sort of feel like we kind of don't need to introduce everybody because we just saw them on the screen, but real quick introduction. So Robyn reversed her bipolar disorder predominantly with a ketogenic diet. And interestingly, as you heard, she started it to lose weight and lower her cholesterol. And lo and behold, all of her symptoms of bipolar depression started to whittle away. And of course, her cholesterol over time went up. And she's only been able to maintain it for 7 years, right? Right? So pretty remarkable. But with an LDL of 300 and a calcium score of 0. So what to do? Dr. Eric Rogers lived with severe depression for many, many years. And as a marathon runner, eating a high carbohydrate diet, just started to develop prediabetes. So I said, why don't I try this low carb ketogenic diet for that? And similar to Robyn, started to see his depression just kind of melt away remarkably in ways he hadn't seen before. But of course, his LDL went up with an elevated calcium score. So as you saw in the documentary, decides to take a medication to lower his LDL. So we're going to ask you about that as well. And then it's kind of weird to introduce yourselves to yourselves, right? Here I am introducing yourself. So Michelle Hearn, who at 12 years old was in an inpatient treatment center for anorexia and really had racing thoughts about food, struggling to eat, and lived with this for many, many years. And sort of out of desperation, tried an animal-based ketogenic diet and again, saw reversal within weeks of her eating disorder thoughts, her anxiety around food, and also with an elevation in her LDL cholesterol. And finally, Lauren Kennedy West, who has documented her own journey quite dramatically and in a very sort of honest and raw way on her YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. But living well with schizophrenia until she's tried a ketogenic diet in 2024, and with dramatic improvements, working with her psychiatrist, tapering off her medications, now living well after schizophrenia. So with that introduction, let's jump into some questions. Now, I mean, a lot of this has to do with how does this treatment compare to other treatments that you've had? So Michelle, let's start with you about, the range of treatments, the type of treatments, and what they did and did not do for you as you were living with your eating disorder.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And what's interesting to me is anorexia and eating disorders. Across the United States, there's not a standard of care. You can go to some place, a rehab center in California, completely different in Texas, different in Hawaii. And what was also very interesting to me is the tube feeding formulas are the exact same formulas that when I was 12, right? It's still like high fructose corn syrup, maltodextrin, soy protein. So the treatments that I went through, when I was actually 12 and I was in treatment, I was put on 7 different medications, basically to kind of zonk you out because I was so anxious. I had multiple, therapists. I had all kinds of, but it was always the standard American diet. They always came back to that. I remember many therapists and other people telling me, you will know you are well when you can eat all foods. And many eating disorders, you're right, they literally will put you in a room and you have to eat these cookies. I remember when I was 12, at that point, I was the last class of individuals that went through where they combined the adults and adolescents. After that, they separated laws, made you separate. But I remember the adults, one adult came up to me and was like, do not tell them you're anxious. Tell them you feel fine so they'll let us go. I was like, why? I'm so anxious. They're, don't say anything. Say you're fine. It was literally almost a game. You would gain weight. There's a great article that was written about the fact that not young people, people with eating, it's called Crisis and Care. People with eating disorders go into treatment, gain weight rapidly, come out of treatment, lose weight rapidly, and the cycle continues. So, that was kind of what I was doing. I was weight stable through adolescence, but that constant, always worrying, thinking about food, having those blood, roller coaster of up and down. So, it wasn't until I really appreciated metabolic health. And I'm a registered dietitian too, so it's amazing to me that, I wasn't taught metabolic health or ketogenic diets in the dietetic program.
Yeah, so now that you've improved your metabolic health, you're using ketogenic therapy, you've put your eating disorder into remission and the anxiety and all the thoughts. What do you think your dietitian colleagues will think about all this, or what do they think about it?
Yeah, I'd like to think it's getting a little bit better as we start to have some research, more research papers. But when I first started talking about it, it was not okay. I'll never forget, I was still actually practicing in acute care, and I went from, paralyzing anxiety, not being able to focus, I was running marathons, not running, to completely changing my life on this low carb diet. And one dietitian kind of said, hey, I need to talk to you. And she's like, all this meat is not good for your heart. And this dietitian was obese, and it was just the cognitive dissonance was amazing to me. I was like, I think I'm doing okay, But once again, it's I think we really have to be a part of the people that shift the paradigm. I think one of my favorite things, and this was my first time seeing this documentary, was they kept saying we have to be curious, we have to ask questions, and if it's a question that bothers you, and ask dietitians about keto or LDL, that will bother them. That means we need to explore it. We need to see, because if you had told me, gosh, throughout my 20s and early 30s that I could just feel so much better, you're going to be able to be calm and be focused and, not be so inflamed. I wouldn't have believed you just because everything I was taught said the opposite.
Now, you all had your own journeys, and I'm sure you all had maybe some doubts and some curiosities as you were starting with ketogenic therapy. But Lauren, you were the most public of everybody starting it. I mean, here you were sort of announcing it to your hundreds of thousands of followers on YouTube. So I'm curious how you felt when you were starting. Were you skeptical? Were you optimistic? Everybody's going to think I'm crazy? Kind of what was going through your head?
I think I was a little bit skeptical, honestly. I think I approached it from the perspective of, what harm could it do to try to improve my metabolic health? Maybe it's not going to get to my symptoms of schizophrenia, but I don't know, the worst thing it can do is improve some other aspect of my health for the 6 months I'm dedicating to trying this. And I think So I started sharing on our YouTube channel about this kind of N=1 real-time experiment of using ketogenic therapy to try to see what effect it could have on my schizoaffective disorder. And I think maybe naively I anticipated a response of like, oh, thank you for showing us this. This is really exciting. We're excited to see. Not the response at all. Well, that's not true. There were some people who were of that mind, but largely hate. And fear and calling me dangerous and harming the community. And so that's been a tough thing to try to navigate over the last 2.5 years. But it's really interesting how, ingrained that skepticism, it's not even skepticism. I think it's a fear of the unknown and how much, I guess, identity gets inwoven in things like navigating a chronic mental illness.
And just to point out, you said your 6-month experiment, but it's now been, you said 2.5 years?
2.5 years, yeah. It went well, so I'm still doing it.
And so it's clear you've all been impacted your own lives dramatically, but also your family's lives. So Robyn, I mean, nothing is more dramatic in this documentary than you and your daughter and your husband and your family. And just what kind of impact has it had on them? You know, how can you even summarize how it's changed your life and their lives?
Well, that is a hard one to summarize. It's just absolutely, it's just different. Everything is different. Before, when I was really ill, I didn't really participate in anything that was going on. We were doing the bare minimum tasks, you know, get you to school, feed you, make sure your homework is done, get you to bed. Just pretty regimented, actually.
This was being treated, right?
This
You were
is-
actually
I'm
in treatment.
I'm in treatment, and that's what life was like. Because when they were gone, if they were at school, I was asleep, very sedated on the medications. And now, I mean, we've been here 2 days, and my son's texting me all the time, like very excited about us being here. And you know, my daughter, she'll come back into the house after she leaves and realizes that she didn't give me a hug. So she'll come back in the house and give me a hug. She's 18 now, so she's getting ready to leave. I'm not sure what we're going to do without her in the house anymore, but it's just, you can't describe the difference. We went and did her senior photo shoot together this past weekend and just got to spend some special time, just she and I doing something together. And that just was completely unheard of when I was in those treatments.
Yeah, I think that's so dramatic to see on the film. So thank you for sharing that. And Eric, of course, we saw how it changed your life as well. But you present sort of maybe what some people don't expect, right? LDL goes up, and maybe we're learning that that's not important. But it seems like there's this kind of false dichotomy that, like, oh, you don't have to treat it. Treating it's bad. We don't want to treat LDL, but you chose to. So maybe it's not such a dichotomy. Help us like go through your reasoning, right?
Well, I think watching the movie helps me each time I watch it. Because right after I say I choose to lower my LDL, I see Budoff and Agustin saying what they said. So yeah, there's not a lot of evidence in the situation I'm in with high CAC and a lean mass hyperresponder. And so if I can lower it without having side effects, is what I'm doing, why not do that?
Yeah. And if someone said you had to stop the diet because of your
I can't stop the diet. No.
And actually, that's interesting. Were you all told at some point to stop the diet or to consider stopping the diet?
I wasn't, no.
They knew better?
They're disinterested. Yeah. They're not interested in, my doctors aren't interested in the diet.
Yeah.
But I want to say how I found it, if that's okay.
I'm sorry?
How I found keto.
Oh, please.
So I'd had mild depression, and it would be years where I were pretty good, and then you would have extreme lows. I learned on the way over here that sometimes that's called double depression. That's not better. So they got progressively worse. And then the very last one, I actually lost interest in eating. So I started losing weight accidentally, and I got just a fraction better. And then I went to the bookstore and I said, well, let's at least not gain all the weight back. And I saw an article in Psychology Today with Dr. Reed going to a conference. And I went to that conference. She sat with me. And we heard Dr. Palmer discuss a patient who stopped hearing voices because of the keto diet. I remember that vividly. And so there you go. I'm just gonna. It was a no-brainer. Yeah. And that was in 2017, so it's almost 10 years. And I've had a high CAC for about 10 years. And
right, and I think that's so important about your case and specifically and what so many people live like that. CACs don't have a timestamp on them, right? So you started a ketogenic diet, it doesn't mean the calcium was built up after you started the ketogenic diet. There are
No.
plenty of other reasons, the way you lived
No,
your life
it had-
before,
it-
right?
It's probably slowed down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be either you have either you're on the ketogenic diet or you're not, your LDL's high or it's not. You can do both. You can have high LDL and treat it. You can be on the ketogenic diet and treat your LDL if that's appropriate, right? So I think that's important to highlight. But the science is teaching us so much more. So are you comfortable with your LDL, Robyn?
I don't even think about my LDL on
Yeah.
a normal basis.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm comfortable with the decision I've made.
Yeah. And the way it's changed your lives. No one can blame you.
No, there's, I say in the film, there's no reason to go back to how I was.
Yeah.
Just because of this one number that, to me, it is very significant, but to me, in my life, in my daily life, is not a significant number. My overall well-being, the joy that I feel on a daily basis, the energy that I have, the things that I can do now, there's no trading it because of that number.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Unwin said, like,
Right.
okay, if it's going to shorten my time,
Yeah.
then I'm okay with that because of how I feel now.
But it sounds so pleasant when she says it with her British accent.
Exactly. I didn't know how to say it the way she said it, but yes.
Now, one of the other issues with the ketogenic diet is some physicians, well-meaning physicians or dietitians might say, yeah, it might help, but gosh, it's just so hard to do and nobody can stick with it. So Lauren, we've seen your husband and your young children here. How do you stick to it with a family and what's it like?
I get that question so much, like it's so hard. How do you do it? It's not that hard. I feel kind of bad giving that answer, like they're wanting it to be hard. It's not. I think maybe the hardest thing is that we haven't changed how our kids eat yet. We have 3 kids. And my husband switched to the ketogenic diet with me when I tried this, but we haven't switched our kids' diet. And at first, that was a little bit challenging, more from like a time consumption perspective of preparing multiple meals every time. But it hasn't been super hard. And maybe the hardest element is, I think, coming to terms with what we're feeding our kids, which is really just what's socially acceptable and what we used to eat too. But I think having gone through this experience myself of benefiting from changing my diet, it doesn't feel good to, know how we're feeding our kids, even though that is very much what's socially accepted. And honestly, that's maybe the hardest thing, is trying to figure out, okay, well, what does it mean to look after myself and my family within the context of how our society is structured? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard because they're telling us it's supposed to be hard.
Right.
And I think that's the only thing. Like, if we keep putting it out in the world that this is hard, nobody else will try it. It's not hard. Except for maybe in a social situation, like you said, but it's not. You just make the decision not to eat these things, and you can't turn around all of the things that get better. And once that happens, so give it like 2 weeks. Once that happens, you don't ask any questions anymore. Just keep going.
Yeah. And it's clear that you've all had incredible mental health benefits. But the rest of life changes too. So Michelle, I'm really curious from an athletic perspective. I mean, your story is pretty dramatic. Can you give us a little bit about your athletics and sort of how they were suffering and how they changed?
Yeah, and just to piggyback too off hard is so relative. Having worked in acute care, changing your eating is hard. I'm like, well, losing a leg from type 2 diabetes, going to dialysis, anyway. Let's talk about something happier. So I was a competitive marathon runner. I really wanted to qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon back in 2020. And to do that at that time, you had to run 2 hours and 48 minutes. And my fastest time was 2:54. So I was training really hard. I was following a super high carbohydrate diet. And I just all of a sudden was having a lot of pain, and fatigue. You get your iron checked, everything was fine. And I just couldn't explain it. I was having panic attacks. Talking to a few dietitian friends, and they're like, you need more carbs, more carbs. It's like, oh, geez, because I was already eating a lot of carbs. So I was like, okay, let's do it. And as you can imagine, that didn't go particularly well. I remember driving to work, and I started sweating, cold sweats, and I had to pull over. And I didn't understand at the time. I was having rebound hypoglycemia. I was having so many carbs. I was just spiking my blood sugar and crashing. And, you know, kind of had that come to Jesus moment where I just decided I wasn't going to do it anymore. I was like, I'm 36 at the time, I'm not going to run. And I just intuitively knew, you know, and I think a lot of us probably intuitively know, like something, you know, something is really wrong. And so I, you know, if I'm not going to run, why don't I eat less carbohydrates? You know, let's try a low carb diet and a ketogenic diet. And as you can imagine, someone with a history of eating disorder, you know, you go to your spouse and are like, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to eat carbs. Like, we thought about it. It didn't, you know, but she was like, all right, whatever. You're going to quit. And, you know, nobody told me, like, drink a lot of water, take electrolytes. So those first few days going from 500 grams of carbs to 0 were kind of rough, you know. Came home with the headache. How's that low carb diet going? It's great. It's great. But no, once I got past, like, the first few days, I just amazed by how much better I felt. But anyway, let's fast forward. After about a month of doing really low carb, I was just home more because, you know, when you're marathon training, you're gone. And so my partner was like, you know, you should go for a run. You should go try. And I was kind of scared because I hadn't run in over a month. But I was like, you know what? Let's go. Put my shoes on. Go run 10 or 15 minutes. And I ran for an hour, and I felt really good. And so, you know, Corinne, my wife, was like, oh my gosh, this is great. You're going to be a recreational runner. We're going to all take pictures. You'll go to the trails. And I was like, what if I could run ultra marathons? So instead of running a marathon, you know, an ultra is anything above 26 miles. And so, you know, she's such a good sport. And of course, you know, COVID hit during that time. So, you know, I signed up for a race. I had a coach. I got canceled. I signed up for another race. I got canceled. And then finally, on November 20th, 2020, I did my first race, and I won. I was 6 hours. I ran a little over 44 miles. On a low carb diet. So it was, it's been pretty incredible. It's been quite the journey. And I work with a coach who is formerly a very low carbohydrate athlete. So I do use carbohydrates strategically in my running. I'm not a zero carb athlete, but being able to oxidize fat for fuel has just been a game changer.
So Eric, compare your mental health now to...
Well, I want to piggyback on that for a
Please, go
minute.
ahead, go
I
ahead.
started running marathons at age 40. And then at age 55, I was told I was pre-diabetic while still running marathons. And that's when I started learning about diet. But then I did 2 marathons, keto, fasted, water and electrolytes only, and no wall. So I just wanted to throw that in. But what was your question again?
So again, mental and physical benefits,
Yeah,
really dramatic.
absolutely.
So if your treatment, this keto treatment, were a pill, what do you think? You think people would be prescribing it?
Of course. There's the side effects are you lose weight and your blood pressure goes down, and oh, by the way, your mental illness gets better. But it's actually happening in the reverse also. Doctors are using it for diabetes, and all their mental illness went away. So, of course.
And so what do you think about the LDL research? Like, what do you have a take home from the documentary and from the research being done?
This wasn't in the documentary, but ApoB, LDL didn't associate with plaque progression. So what am I doing?
Right.
And
so
you are a cardiologist.
yeah. So I mean, my 2 cents is this is how science starts, right? I mean,
Fair.
it doesn't answer all the questions. It's going to ask more questions than it answers. But
Early
it's a
days.
question that nobody was asking. Like, how could
Yeah.
nobody be asking this? With you four, the way you're living your lives, how could nobody be curious to say, like, wow, well, I wonder if it really means what we think it means, considering how much you've transformed your lives.
It's
course,
not just not curious, it's also suppression. They don't want anybody to know that this is possible.
But I also like what I heard some cardiologists say, treat the disease, not the lab number.
Yeah,
That's
like,
fair.
I like how Dave said it's almost as if the LDL is the disease.
Correct.
Right? How he
Yeah.
said that in the film. Right. Well, this has been great. I think we're running out of time here, so we do need to wrap up. I want to thank you all so much for sharing your stories with the documentary and for being here live and in person to share your stories. And I'm sure people will want to ask you more questions throughout the evening. So thank you so much. Oh, yes, Jan.
Share with people the studies we have coming out of the East Coast synopsis. I realize we have representatives of each disease that we have really important research coming out very soon.
Oh, okay. Yes, so there are a number of funded studies that are coming out very soon. One being anorexia, Dr. Guido Frank doing a study from UCSD he did a pilot study, so we expect to see that published very soon. And there are so many ongoing trials. Actually, plug metabolicmind.org. You can go to our science page where you can see all the ongoing trials, all the published trials. We really try and make the science really visible for everybody, and our Think Smart page where people are sharing, like you are sharing their personal experiences, so you can learn about the science and the personal nature of it. Yeah. All right. Well, good. Thank you so much.